Take a look at this traditional portrait of Isaac Newton. This is the public genius of Cambridge, the man who invented calculus and wrote the laws of motion that govern our physical universe. This title page belongs to the Principia, the text that cemented his legacy as a purely rational mathematical mind in European history. But behind the locked doors of his private quarters at Trinity College, seen here, he was living an entirely different life. This engraving illustrates the reality of his nights. Away from his mathematics, he spent his evenings bent over a furnace, melting metals and grinding minerals in a physical pursuit of the philosopher's stone. The man who defined the Age of Reason was secretly its most dedicated occultist, hiding a double life that would remain varied for centuries. Starting in the mid-1660s, he maintained this secret practice for roughly 3 decades. He approached it with the exact same obsessive rigor that he brought to his physics. We can visualize the immense scale of his labor through recreations like this, representing a real notebook known today as Kane's Manuscript 33. This single volume runs to roughly 65,000 words of compiled alchemical reading notes. Looking closely at his surviving documents, his handwriting is tiny, dense, and remarkably precise. He meticulously logged his private formulas and step-by-step metallurgical operations completely out of the public eye. To even attempt these experiments, he had to overcome a massive hurdle. Alchemists deliberately wrote their texts in code, using cover names called deckname to hide their true formulas from outsiders. Newton essentially built a cipher to crack them. By obsessively cross-referencing different authors against one another, he managed to reverse engineer their secret language so he could replicate the experiments they were trying to hide. Newton systematically applied the scientific method to these occult texts, treating them as a legitimate research program. Running in parallel with his alchemy, Newton was quietly sitting on a second, highly dangerous project. He was writing extensive theological research, concluding that the doctrine of the Trinity was a corruption of early Christianity. In late 17th century England, rejecting the Trinity was a strict legal heresy. If this private research had leaked, it would have cost him his Cambridge professorship, his reputation, and potentially his freedom. Sitting on these two massive secrets, while simultaneously writing the Principia, took a severe toll. In 1693, Newton suffered a complete mental and physical breakdown, sending paranoid letters accusing his friends of plotting against him. Watching liquid mercury heat up and release toxic vapor, it's easy to understand why modern historians debate whether this breakdown was caused by stress or by severe heavy metal poisoning from his own laboratory. He did eventually recover, and later in life he took a highly visible government job at the Royal Mint. There, he spent his final working years hunting down counterfeiters and aggressively protecting the purity of England's coinage. The solitary researcher who spent decades in the dark, obsessed with the hidden transformation of metals, ended his career as a public agent enforcing the strict purity of the state's money. When Newton died in 1727, his family inherited his estate and immediately discovered the vast archive of alchemical notebooks and heretical theology. Unsure of what to do with the scandal, they quietly locked it away. For well over a century, the secret held. In 1872, the family donated a portion of the archive to Cambridge University, but they only handed over the papers deemed purely scientific. The rest stayed hidden, cementing a sanitized record for the public. Looking at this 1930s London street scene, we can anchor the moment that sanitized record finally broke. By 1936, crushing inheritance taxes forced the descendants to put the remaining hidden manuscripts up for auction at Sotheby's. The economist John Maynard Keynes, pictured here, heard about the sale and immediately grasped what was happening. He began buying up the lots straight from the auction floor and hunting down the rest from private dealers. Keynes eventually left his massive collection of Newton's papers to King's College, Cambridge, seen here. Combined with other recovered documents, researchers finally had the full, unredacted picture of Newton's mind. After spending years reading the private notebooks he had purchased, Keynes prepared an address to deliver his final verdict on the man. Newton was not the first of the Age of Reason. He was the last of the magicians. The figure who mapped the mathematical laws of the universe was actually driven the entire time by a lifelong search for nature's hidden occult forces.